We're back. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Alley Ranch podcast.
Ooh. Yep. I was just testing my mic. Yes, hello everyone. It's been quite a long time.
It's been
Over a year.
yes, just over a year.
How you been?
Well, you've been with me for most of that year, so I think you know.
So a
I'm
lot of
pretty
changes. A lot of changes.
Yeah, we're no longer in a nice, luxurious hunting cabin. We are now in a basement.
Yeah, we've been demoted to the basement, but that's okay. We can still make some good stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess changes in the personal lives. I joined the seminary last January, so I'm a seminarian now, and Joseph's actually a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so.
Indeed.
Just kidding on that last part.
We didn't need to know that you were kidding.
I don't think you could achieve a black belt at 15 years old. It takes a long time. It's a very arduous process. You gotta dedicate yourself for years.
How about just over a year?
No, not just over a year. That doesn't work. So, what are we talking about today, Joe?
I believe today we are discussing the hero's journey and how that correlates to the Lord of the Rings.
Right. And just most stories you've ever seen, or movies, or books you've read in general, because it's kind of the general, how'd you say? I mean, it's the hero's journey.
It's what most stories are based off of, even indirectly, even if you don't know about it, that's what it's going to be based off of, because that's
Right.
just...
It's been, our, the culture, the storytelling culture in modern society has just soaked it up without even, probably some people without even knowing it, yeah, but I'm sure most writers are aware of it, because the hero's journey was, I wouldn't really know how, it's called, Joseph Campbell was the creator of the idea of it, I guess. He calls it also the Monomyth, but he would have been born like 1905, so I think he lived until the 80s or 90s, but honestly I don't know too much about like the mythology or the philosophy behind it or how he came to that. I just know he was like a mythologist basically, so that makes sense because this is based on all ancient stories, like the story of Christ and multiple different cultures, but yeah, we're probably just going to be a little more superficial and just a surface level what the steps in the hero's journey is or are and how that relates to, I guess we were going to go with the Lord of the Rings just because that's a very famous, easy example.
And it's what I know about.
And it's what Joseph knows about because he's read them all and listened to them all. So I have some printouts here just on kind of different aspects of the hero's journey. Some are deeper than others, but I was just going to start with this one. So I guess you want to just go into it.
As in what?
Just the steps in the journey.
I mean, yeah.
It can be kind of, it's usually split into like 3 parts or 4 parts. The beginning is there's the ordinary natural world, and then there's the supernatural world, and then there's the return to the ordinary world after the adventure has happened, basically. So the first step is the call to action. This is like probably going to be some chance encounter with like a magical creature or just something, out of the ordinary, because, your hero starts out as just an ordinary person living in Podunk, whatever, Dewey County, South Dakota, doing their own thing. So they get the call to adventure, which is basically, they're told that there's a problem that they have to solve, a challenge of theirs. Are you hearing this like tinny?
It's just, it happens.
Do you think it's because our microphones are too close to each other?
No.
No, this is new to me. I don't remember it doing this before.
It's probably just a small room. I'm sure it won't pick up on film.
Definitely won't pick up on film. Maybe audio. So
This
anyways,
guy.
so that's the first step. There's the call to action. So what's that in the Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, the call to action and like the first few steps, as in the ordinary world, would just be like, well, the book starts out as just, you know, Frodo just having fun in the Shire with his uncle, and then it, like, the call to action kind of in a way starts when Bilbo has his birthday party and goes away, because that is when Frodo originally has a feeling. His original feeling is just, oh, I want to go after him because I miss my uncle, because he's very close to me. But then, after a little while, he realizes that the ring that was left to him is even more important than that, and it gives him even more of a reason to go. But it becomes so important that it's even more. It's actually the main reason he has to do something about everything.
He's basically not given a choice.
Yeah, he's not given a choice about that one.
So we're getting ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah.
There's it can come in flip-flop, I guess. It says there's the call to adventure, and then there's the refusal of the call, or the reluctancy of the call, and then it says they meet the mentor figure, which is usually probably some type of wizard or sage, wizened older person, or maybe just a person who's from the spiritual or the supernatural world that the character will eventually enter. But they give advice, they encourage them. But in Lord of the Rings, it's a little different because he already knew Gandalf.
Yeah, he already knew Gandalf, but in the way that it comes as a mentor figure, because Gandalf reveals more of himself to Frodo, because the hobbits are mainly, they just know Gandalf. Just like, oh, he's just a guy that has fun fireworks and can do these fun things. He blows smoke rings and stuff. But then he only reveals himself to Frodo, like he did with Bilbo, as a powerful wizard. And
so he does technically meet the mentor, because now he is going to mentor him through this problem of his. So, and then there is the refusal of the call, because he goes, take it.
Yeah, he wants to give the ring to Gandalf because he doesn't want, it's too big for him. He doesn't want to have to deal with this.
Which is how every hero feels, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something that is thrust upon your shoulders that you think is too much for you to bear, but throughout your journey you come to realize that you are fit for whatever you need to do. Maybe you fail.
Okay, so then after all of this introduction, there's usually the crossing of the threshold into the special world, or the world of adventure. And this is where, there's multiple things that happen at this point, but really it's just kind of like the setting. The stage has been set, and now you're introducing, your friends, your allies, your enemies, new characters, I guess, if we're going to go from a storytelling perspective. The new characters that are going to aid you and then be a problem to you, and then it's just a series of tests and trials, and that may last a long portion of the book. That may be, I guess it depends on how long your story is, but
don't get too close to it.
Is it my watch?
Yeah,
okay.
Get too close to it. It does that.
But I guess in here it says, hero faces a series of tests from allies and enemies. Here it it kind of skips. Yeah, Road of Trials. Oh, this is something that's kind of consistent through what I've read. It's like there's the belly of the whale moment where they get, and I don't know how this really applies, if it's just because they get thrust into this new world and they kind of feel like, helpless and like overwhelmed, and maybe that's the belly. That's probably what they mean by the belly of the whale. That I think that happens before they meet their friends and stuff like that. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking it is, but I don't know. Does Frodo have like a belly in the whale moment?
Well, not that I can really think of putting in those words, no. But it's just like he does have a moment where he feels overwhelmed, but it's not that big of a deal. It's not put that much light on because Frodo is just like, well, he has like the initial shock and like the resistance to his call, but it's very like momentary. It doesn't last very long. He very quickly.
Is this when he's still in the Shire?
Yeah, he very quickly accepts it and just kind of moves on, and he just knows what he has to do, and he doesn't really.
And I guess as far as the first book, he's not really meeting new friends for a large majority of the first book because it's all just like Sam and his kinsfolk, you know.
Yeah, just kind of like his friends and allies thing kind of happens, and then it happens again later because it's almost like
he meets.
It's almost like his story kind of like goes back, it like reverts back because he has this first start of his journey where he goes and he leaves the Shire and he enters like he crosses the threshold into the new world.
In most books, like getting to Rivendell, that's probably would be the end of your story, you know, if it's just a short story. But this is such a drawn out, not like it's drawn out in a bad way, but you know, it's a very long story. So the whole first book of him getting to Rivendell could be. I mean, it was a book, right? Because it was split into 2 books.
Yeah, the first of the trilogy was split into 2 books.
When did the first book end?
Right before he gets into Rivendell, because you see, like the entire first book is him going off and he meets Aragorn and that's his ally, and then he like encounters the Nazgul, which are his enemies. But
they're the main enemies of the book, basically.
And the first book, he goes through a lot of like different challenges on his like road of trials, basically. But he just keeps going, and he has he has a few different ordeals of just resisting the power of the ring in different places.
And this is also known as like the initiation. Not in any of the papers I have, but that's what I've read. Like the initiation would be. I guess, yeah, you know, Weathertop. That's a good initiation. He gets stabbed.
Yeah, it's a character building moment that he carries with him for the rest of the thing. So it changes the character initially because
hardens him.
Yeah, it kind of like makes him kind of like quaver from the thing. It's just like, oh, this journey is going to be really hard, but then it also toughens them up after they get over the initial shock. They're just like, well, I've dealt with it once, I can do it again.
Okay.
But yeah, so like he kind of does that ordeal there, and then you know he keeps going, and they get to Rivendell, and he gets healed, which would be on the paper it's written the elixir or the reward. So he gets kind of a reward for getting to Rivendell. Like he gets a time of rest. He thinks that he thinks his journey is over. So and then he just is resting. He gets healed up, and he thinks that the ring's gonna go off to these new carriers, and they're gonna finish the quest for him.
Right, and the hero's journey is kind of a short circle. I mean this specific one obviously is more in-depth, but there's some where it's just like he meets the mentor, tests and allies, the big ordeal. I think we can pause it.
So, Joseph, you want to come and pause it? Do you still have water?
This probably isn't what you saw when you paused the video.
You know why? Because we, personally, had a call to action.
Call to adventure. We had to go out there, get a bull in. Got kind of wild, but it was a success.
Yeah.
Kind of ornery guy. tried to kill me and Joseph. We were shutting the gate, and we looked behind us, and it's already dark out, and we just see the bull trotting right for us.
We had to jump up on the pickup to escape him.
Oh, yes.
He was
But
angry.
anyways, we're back now. So where were we? More or less just Frodo's trials.
Yeah.
The trial stage.
Yeah.
And this is I was kind of wanting to get into this earlier, but we got interrupted. Like, the basic hero's journey is like, you know, there's the test, allies, enemies get introduced, and then it's just like trial. There's the rest before the big event, and then there's some type of big. Well, it's usually it seems like it's like this. There's it's what they call approaching the inner cave. I don't know. This is just from Joseph Campbell's myth story, but usually they're preparing for this big ordeal and interaction. Then they have one, and it's usually like not really the climax of the film or book yet. It's like their first big conflict, and they usually fail in some way, and then they have to like recuperate, and they usually gain some. I'm basically going through the whole thing now, so they basically gain some insight or a revelation, and then they take this new knowledge and face that problem again, and then they can defeat it. But I guess what I was trying to say is Frodo has big ordeals and then rests, and big ordeals and rests, like we were saying when we were driving the pickup, or I was saying, in the Fellowship of the Ring alone, he has the Old Forest. And does he meet Tom after that or before that?
After Merry and Pippin get stuck in a tree.
Okay, he meets them. But then he saves them from the Barrow Wights, right?
Yeah, and then they meet Tom Bombadil, and then that's their rest after being traumatized by a magical tree.
Oh, and then they
go on to the Barrow Downs, and they get trapped by the spirits of the past.
Like, that's honestly one of the most scary parts of the book. It's pretty freaky. But anyways, so they have the Tom Bombadil rest, and then after being with Aragorn and Weathertop and Frodo getting stabbed by the Nazgul, was it the Witch King? Was. And then, you know, about dying, then he gets to a long respite, or respite is how some people have said it, in Rivendell. Like, who knows, they don't even know how long they're there, but they get all healed up, and then kind of the next part of his adventure begins. So it's like, since it's a longer story, it's more of a cycle, I guess, because then they go to, you know, they try to take the pass of Caradhras?
Yeah.
Caradhras?
Caradhras, yeah.
And then they go through Moria, and Gandalf, well, he dies, yeah.
Yeah, they lose Gandalf, and then that's really kind of like
deflating.
Another big ordeal for the entire company as a whole. They lose their leaders, so they're all, that kind of really just brings everybody down, and then they get to Lorien, and then that's a rest period again.
That would almost be similar to like the failure. Yeah. Well, I mean, they got out, but they lost someone.
Yeah.
But it's interesting in this more in-depth diagram I have. It says there's the things like the ordeal. So, you know, there's the approach to the inmost cave, and then there's what would be called the ordeal, which they say it can either be dismemberment or a wandering or a harrowing of the soul.
And if we're putting that towards the loss of Gandalf in the mines, then that would be almost dismemberment and a harrowing of the soul.
And at this point, this is cool. Absolutely. They're in, so it's the first threshold is when you enter the adventure world, and then there's the trials and everything. And then down here it says you're entering into the descent, or the descent into the abyss, which is totally where they are, because he falls into the abyss.
Yeah.
Totally. So, what next? Then there's Boromir. Oh, let's talk about that. Where would that fit in?
That would just
another trial.
yeah. I mean, the whole thing is kind of hard to like put it into different categories when everything is like if we had specific categories for everything, then just a lot of them would be just like a regular trial.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like different trials for the character, but like almost like for the, it's kind of like once the company is together, like after Rivendell, it's like the hero's journey. Like they like the company becomes like almost one character, and
they all
moves
kind of
forward as a
experience it.
whole. Yeah.
Right, because when Gandalf dies, everyone feels the grief and the loss and things. There's actually an interesting, I haven't discussed this yet, but there's another diagram called the hero's inner journey, and I think this would be more for if you're trying to construct your own story. So I guess just to go through it all pretty quickly, from the beginning to the end, the character starts out with a limited awareness of the problem, which means, they're in their natural, normal world. And then the second one is an increased awareness of need for change, or the call to action, basically. Then there's the fear, the resistance to the change, and then there's the overcoming of the fear with the help of the mentor usually. And at this point, you've entered into the supernatural world, where the character is committing to the change, and they're on the adventure now. They're new to it, but they're committed to it. And then it says the next one is experimenting with new conditions. What do you think that means exactly?
I don't know if it's like testing their boundaries of this new world. Kind of like seeing like what's super dangerous and like what they can handle as a person, like what they can like. It's just like, okay,
like Frodo trying on the ring, right? Because I mean, I guess he never really experiments with it without there being a need, or like it's an accident, right? So I guess he doesn't really try to experiment with it.
Yeah, he just kind of ends up doing, except for in the House of Tom Bombadil when he puts it on just to make sure that, because he gives Tom the ring and Tom makes it disappear in like a funny like magic trick thing, and then he gives it back to him, and Frodo's just like, I don't know if this is the same ring. So he puts it on and like tries to sneak away, but then they find out that Tom isn't affected by the ring at all.
So he still sees Frodo.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Well, maybe that's not exactly the right, I guess, example for this experimenting with new conditions. Maybe it would be like, I don't know. I guess that's probably just pretty general. You're going through the initial, like the initiatory trials, and
it could be like in this, like it could be like finding like the different friends and like the allies and the enemies. Like that's experimenting with your new conditions. You have to know what is good and what is bad. So you're like mentally, you're just like, okay, I can trust this person, and these things are the enemy, and this is that, and this is that. And you have to go through different like trial and error processes to figure that all out.
Right. And then eventually, so you've been doing this trial and error, and then there's the preparing for the major change. So this is usually, obviously a preparation for like the big, what you would say, conflict that they're going to come into contact with. And then that leads to the big change with a feeling of life or death. And this is what would be called, the supreme ordeal, or going into the abyss, or things like that. So the character has kind of a revelatory moment. And so I think Frodo, like with Shelob poisoning him, he like is dead basically.
Yeah,
I would say that's probably the best example for him in the whole book of this big ordeal, because it's like that's the most defeated he's been so far.
Yeah. And like added on to that, when he gets captured by the orcs immediately afterwards, and he thinks that he's lost the ring immediately. Like he gets there and he doesn't know that Sam had taken the ring from him. So he he wakes up and he thinks, oh, well, the enemy's won because he has the ring now, and there's nothing I can do about this.
Well, that definitely fits the. How would it say here? The ordeal. The hero faces a crisis, confronts his greatest fear. I guess the spider's pretty scary.
And also losing the ring because.
And he lost the ring, and it says the hero tastes death, which he totally did because he was like naked and poisoned and barely survived only because Sam was there.
Yeah, that's when like kind of the pair almost become one person if we could apply, like we could just like take Frodo, instead of just looking specifically at him as a character, we could kind of morph him and Sam together as like one character in the last half of the Return of the King book, because Sam is like making most of the decisions and stuff, and he's doing a lot of work, but like they're like one person. Frodo is just like kind of like the instrument of the ring now, so Sam is just carrying him basically.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. But it's good because, I mean, it shows that, like we were talking about Rango the other day, and how I have a problem with Rango because Rango is like this really flawed character, but he kind of becomes the savior of the town, and there's some pretty like intense imagery and symbolism to back that up, but it's like, I was telling Joseph, I don't really like that because it's making him like the savior and the redeemer, and that's just not really how. I mean, that would be like superhero movies and all that type of thing. That's kind of how it is, you know. Like the savior is a natural person, whereas in the Lord of the Rings, it's like no one was the savior. Frodo wasn't the savior. It wasn't Aragorn. They all just played a part, you know, in the book. So Frodo really didn't have. By the end of it, he failed basically.
Yeah, but by the end of the books, he had nothing. Like, he had no recognition by anybody at home. He was just like a normal guy. Nobody really, like, he was almost like kind of ignored by everybody because his friends Merry and Pippin had like won renown in foreign lands.
Right.
And everybody like looked up to them because they were these great warriors and leaders. But Frodo was like, he was like almost like broken on the inside, and he just like, nobody really cared about him really, other than like his close friends and stuff. So everybody kind of ignored him. So this is like when you're in that position of just like you gave everything to save these people, but you don't get anything out of it.
It's pretty deep. It's like, well, it's not like Christ, but I mean, he died on the cross and he knew so many people were going to ignore him and, you know, continue living a life of sin. He's like, I'm doing all this for, you know, literally everybody on the planet, but so few are actually going to appreciate it. So I guess that could get us to the reward. Let's see here. Yes, there's the showdown, the catharsis, the climax, and the resurrection. I guess, I mean, I don't know with Frodo if there's a resurrection besides him waking up from getting poisoned by the spider, but I don't know if this completely applies to him because it says, you know, there's the ordeal, he tastes death, and then there's the reward. Hero enjoys the reward of having confronted fear and death. And then there's the road back. So the hero takes the road back and recommits to completing the journey. And then he faces a climactic ordeal. And then this will purify, redeem, and transform the hero on the threshold home. And then the hero returns with the elixir to benefit the ordinary world. I don't know if that really applies to Frodo, because it's like he didn't really enjoy a reward from confronting fear. Well, he got the ring back and he got Sam back. So I guess that was his reward. But it's not like he got like a rest or anything. He was still like totally depleted and just tired.
And also you could kind of apply the failing the ordeal to when he's in the mountain about to cast the ring in, and then he just gets fully corrupted by the ring and puts it on. That's, he's failing his task there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of think of like Sam Sam doesn't really do that. I realize it's all Gollum,
That's where like the fate comes in, you know.
Yeah.
It's like that's where it kind of comes from, the higher power, you know, everything in the book happened for a reason. Destiny or whatever. But wow. I guess his reward at the end is he gets to leave. Why does he leave?
Because he's like mentally and physically scarred from his journey. Like he has like he's basically got like he's like permanently in pain from the stab in his shoulder, and then also he was stung, and like they all left his mark on him. They never like fully healed at all, because like the wound that he received from the Witch King, like it was like spirit. It was like affects the spirit and the body, so he was like permanently like almost like kind of like a depression state almost, and it also just kind of like hurts him, and he's just kind of like.
Even after the ring was destroyed?
Yeah, even afterwards, he was like kind of like on the day that it happens, it's like the strongest feeling, and it's just kind of like a shell of himself, basically.
When it happened, the day of?
Yeah, the
like
day.
The anniversary?
Yeah, the anniversary every time, so. And then just like the fact that he, like the ring had such a hold on him by the end that it being gone is just kind of like a hole in his like spirit, basically. That like is just slowly healing, but it is always going to be there, and he just like can't get over that. So that's why he goes into the Undying Lands.
So does Gandalf like? How does that come about? Does he set that up? I haven't read these. I read them a while ago, but I don't remember.
Well, it's basically just like, I think he just talked to Galadriel about it. I think Galadriel brought it up to him at one point and just said, like, you know, all the rings must pass away eventually because it's forever going to be on your mind and you're never really going to be rid of it. And the only place you'll really have peace is across the sea. So they planned it really at Rivendell with Bilbo. Him and Bilbo kind of planned the thing together when they got back from the journey originally. And yeah, it was like Frodo knew it was going to happen. He knew it was just Bilbo going, but he hadn't fully committed to himself going along as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then he eventually like kind of got together with Gandalf in the like years leading up to it, and they planned it out, and they just left.
I wonder about that. Like, are they going to be immortal over there, or what? What is it?
Probably.
I just wonder about that, I guess, because I guess I think I understand the significance of that with him being, you know, the ring bearer and everything, and he had the heaviest load and he had all this damage like that he's going to deal with forever, so he gets the reward of going to basically heaven, whatever, you know, their heaven. But I also wonder, this is something I want to ask Tolkien. It's like, I guess it for me, like from a Christian aspect, like a Catholic aspect, it's like, why wouldn't you just have Frodo stay in Middle Earth and like, you know, suffer, but then when he dies, he'll attain some reward. But I guess, I don't know, I mean, Tolkien would know why he sent him there. I guess that just, this echoing is bad. That's probably just the best. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, like, it's like it almost like wouldn't seem fair from because he writing it like from a storyteller's perspective, the idea of just like, well, he'll die someday and get a reward in the afterlife. It's just like, well, if he gets that, that means that basically everybody else is going to get that too. So it's not really fair that he just gets the same thing as everybody else. So he should get some sort of reward in this life, even though because everybody else does, but he doesn't.
Right. And I guess, you know, Tolkien's Middle Earth, it's not like there's like a religion or anything. There's a God, but it's not like, I'm assuming he doesn't really go in depth about what happens when the Middle Earth people die or anything like that. So yeah, that wouldn't be satisfying. That makes sense. That wouldn't be satisfying from a story. I mean, as a reader.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it does. I mean, it's interesting because he's still living, but he gets to basically. It's like I don't want to make connections because I know Tolkien didn't like allegory.
Yeah.
He doesn't want. I mean, make connections, but it wasn't his intent. But it's like Frodo made the biggest sacrifice, so he gets to go to heaven, body and soul. Not like he's Christ, but it's just
Yeah.
You can see the parallels with a lot of the characters in the story. So yeah, that's cool though. That's pretty cool. I never really thought about that before. Man, I really want to finish these books now. I was in the library the other day, and I was just reading The Two Towers from where I left off because I've been listening to the audiobooks. But yeah, I guess we more or less went through it. So I mean, this is basically going to be every book or story you read. There's the call to adventure, the refusal, the meeting of the mentor. They cross the threshold, then they go through the growth period with the tests and the allies and meeting the enemies, and then they approach the ordeal. The ordeal happens. They about die, or they die, and then they come back. They get a reward of some kind, if it's knowledge or if it's an actual physical thing that's going to help them. With the final battle, they go to the final battle, they win, they come back home, changed, and they're like a leader now, and the community sees them. Except for Frodo. That's just really interesting.
Yeah, it's just
the Shire they didn't care about him. But I guess
it's just the people in the Shire didn't know what he did.
Right.
They just knew that when the Shire was invaded by Saruman at the end of the books, they just knew that Merry and Pippin were like the big warriors that like led everybody to victory. So they're just like, and Frodo was like trying to like be the peacemaker.
Oh really?
So like that's one reason that Frodo.
So Merry and Pippin helped lead the hobbits.
Yeah, they were
revolt.
like the main strategists and stuff, and they were like the main leaders. And like Pippin went and like basically gathered an army.
What did Frodo do?
Frodo just kind of sat with Sam, and he was like telling them, he's just like, guys, we need to try to do this. Like, it's just like, let's try not to stay in the Shire with everything that's happened outside, because he wanted to keep it like as pure as possible, basically.
Did that happen though?
They ended up killing a good amount of people. There was a big battle at the end of it, and like it didn't end up with like too much like
Does
loss.
It say
and
what
stuff.
Frodo thinks about that, or not really?
He was just kind of sad.
Yeah, but I mean,
because basically he had fought so hard to keep that from happening. So he just comes back and he's like, oh, it happened anyways. So he keeps getting these feelings of like he gets like his main journey all the way to like the mountain and stuff, and then he like after that he's just happily like hanging out with his friends and stuff, and then he makes his way back to the Shire, and then he finds out that while he was gone and not there to defend it, all this stuff happened and they had to make it right again.
But I guess there wasn't really a way to do it peacefully, because it's not like you're gonna get like some type of peace treaty with Saruman or something.
Yeah.
He's kind of evil. Huh. But I mean, I guess that's funny because people say how I've kind of read, and I remember thinking this when I read it, like why, and it's probably affected, watching the movies multiple times affected how I thought about it, but just like, why is this happening? This just seems like weird.
Yeah.
Like, why are they going back to the Shire and doing this? Like the big battle already happened. This just kind of feels like anticlimactic and odd.
Yeah,
But
it's kind of like, because like Tolkien saw it in a way where it's just like, well, we kind of foresaw this from the beginning of like, just like the Shire has never been involved in any like major conflict
Mhm.
So they thought like, well, it's just like you see that like they are so vulnerable that they like if the rest of the world is going to suffer so much that they are going to like share a little like even in like the slightest bit that they do. So like,
But they deal with it. I mean, aren't they kind of just fighting the other hobbits that turn bad?
no, it's like they just kind of like the other like it's mostly just like men that Saruman had like hired basically.
So they fight a bunch of men.
Yeah.
That's cool. But I mean that. I guess we left that out. That kind of completes the hero's journey because the hero returns with the elixir to benefit the world. I guess this would be more so the group because Merry and Pippin are the leaders. I guess more like you said.
And Sam comes back with like the gift that he had gotten from Galadriel in the first book. She gives him a little box of soil from her garden and a seed of a malorn tree, and he plants the seed where the party tree had been next to Bilbo's house, and then he just kind of like goes around the Shire and like he uses like all of his resources very very what's the word, just very like I don't know, he uses it very like sparingly in going around, and he just kind of like every new tree, because like in the like scarring of the Shire, like all these trees have been cut down and like the beautiful Shire had been like kind of like made like
Defaced.
it was defaced and everything was like ugly now, so they just kind of
Because they got like industrialized
Mhm.
basically.
So like he went back and Sam basically planted every tree, and he just like put like one grain of the soil next to each one, and then he just kind of they worked so hard to make the Shire like to rebuild it, and they ended up building it up even more
Nicer.
beautiful than it was before, and then he eventually just goes and throws the rest of the remaining soil up in the wind, and he doesn't keep any for himself like was originally intended, and he gives everything to the rest of
Wow.
the Shire.
It's interesting that like it seems like Merry and Pippin and Sam contribute, and Frodo's just like, is he just in his hole basically?
Yeah,
At his house.
He'll help. He helps, but like he doesn't get as much recognition because he's doing it he's doing it very selflessly.
Okay, so he's helping. He's still helping. He just doesn't have like a major role.
Yeah.
Okay. Man, that's really cool. It is interesting that like Merry and Pippin had, they had their own challenges and stuff, but it's like Frodo had the biggest challenge out of those, I guess, especially related to Merry and Pippin. So it's like kind of interesting to think that Merry and Pippin, for what they did, which was good, they got like a reward temporarily, like not immediately, but it was just like their constituents, recognized them, and so for what they did, they got a reward. I guess you could say like in this world, Frodo didn't really get anything. He had to go to the next world to get his reward, because really what he's getting, what he's earning is greater than anything that Frodo or anything that Merry and Pippin, get. And Sam gets a family.
And he ends up becoming like the mayor of Mickle Delving, which is basically he's like kind of like
Sam?
Yeah. He ends up being like he's like it's basically like the president of the Shire almost, but like it's just like it's like a very like localized governments. So like he's just kind of like he's recognized everywhere, and he like kind of like runs the post office and like organizes like the police force, but he doesn't do like a whole lot, and everybody's really independent, but he's still recognized as this like public figure.
Right, so everyone, all up. And what do the other hobbits do?
They just become like the heads of their different families, because like Pippin becomes like the head of the Took family, and Merry becomes the head of the Brandybuck family, and they all just kind of go on, and then they like they'll go back to like Rohan and Gondor every once in a while, and yeah, but,
Pretty
like,
awesome.
I think it's also interesting that like as you like can also apply the hero's journey thing to like a lot of other characters in the books, because like Boromir has his own like I mean like every character has like its own arc, but like he has like his challenges and like it's a lot more.
His arc is compressed.
Yeah, it's very compressed, but like he has this whole thing where he has his failure, which is trying to take the ring from Frodo, and then he has his what are the next?
Well,
he just has his like.
Yeah, these aren't organized the best, but he has the ordeal. Well, it's basically like a redemption.
Yeah.
It doesn't say it here, but it said it in other places. You know, it's like you fail and then you have a moment, like a cathartic moment, and then you rededicate yourself, and then you have your redemption moment.
Yeah, and you come back to bring better things to the world, which he ended up doing. He tried to save the hobbits, but he did the best that he could. He redeemed himself.
It's like, yeah, he may not have succeeded in saving them, but he killed a bunch of orcs, which is pretty odd. You know, it's like he didn't
in
fail.
his goal of doing like giving all that he had.
Yeah, like from a moral perspective, he redeemed himself. So it doesn't, it's like he tried to fix it, and that's the best you could ask for, because they weren't, they still got the hobbits, but they ended up being okay. And then of course Aragorn's got a good one.
Yeah, he starts out as just a young kid living at Rivendell. This isn't even in the books,
right?
But like his own like journey, he doesn't really have like a rejection of his call, but he's told that he is like the son of kings and that his duty is to like go and like hunt things in the wild basically, and he's just like he's kind of really happy about it, and then
sweet.
Yeah, he's just like, well, no, he knows his destiny and he accepts it right away, and then he just continues on his life for the like 50 some years before the books start.
Because how old is he?
87. And yeah.
Boromir's interesting though, because like his life, he's like what is he? He's like a captain of the army, basically. And I mean it's just like he was traveling for how long to find Rivendell? Like months?
110 days.
And I mean it's like you can see it all with his too, because he commits to this journey, this adventure, and
he has this call to action, which is his dream and his brother's dream that they have.
Right.
And then he commits to it and goes in front of the council and says, "Hey, I need to go do this." So he goes.
Yeah. And then there's all the steps in the journey with the mountain and with the mines and with Lorien and the river, and then it's the what is it? The preparation for the major conflict. It's the watch, I think, because you can tell he's changing in the book, and he's becoming more and more corrupted. Then there's the big thing, and he fails, and then he comes back. So it's really cool. Yeah, that's really all I can think of as far as this story in particular.
Yeah.
But Lord of the Rings is just fantastic.
There's so much there. It's so immersive, and
yeah,
you can go on for hours and hours and days talking about how because there are so many characters and there's just like a different story for all of them. Like,
yeah,
they all have their own little stories that may be short, but there's a lot there.
Tolkien was like a master.
Mm-hmm.
You can't talk about that without talking about him being like a pretty faithful Catholic his whole life,
And he also lost a finger and was typing all the books with 9 fingers. So
which finger did he lose?
I think it was the index finger. I don't know.
How did he lose it?
In the war, I think.
Whoa.
Yeah, because he writes in his essays about how he was working nights writing them, and how it was because he had to write and rewrite the books with 9 fingers, and he just kind of makes it like a joke how it takes longer when you don't have 10 fingers.
Oh. Oh. But yeah, I mean, he was a really smart guy. He was a, what's it called? He was like he wasn't a professor in philology, but he studied philology, which is basically like the origins of languages. And not just languages, like the history of each word, you know? It's like really in depth into the culture. And he knew like multiple languages.
And
He knew like
multiple
old
languages.
English and old like Finnish.
Old English was like what he spoke.
I can't remember. He knew like 7 languages, and then he made up his own languages, so it's like astounding.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I'm sure he was, you know, pretty well versed in like European history and mythology and things like that, but then you think about it like this. Having what I assume would be, you know, virtues from being a devout Catholic, and it's like his soul was, you know, alive, and he was trying to follow, I guess, I'm not sure how to say it. This is just my theory, is him being such a good Catholic and being so devout, it like made him, basically it's like sin makes you stupid is like a common saying. It's not like it makes you dumb, but it just blinds you to a lot of things. So him probably practicing virtue his whole life, he just gained virtues like wisdom and things like this, you know, so he could just be better at what he did. So he was just a better storyteller, and he was just more of a, I mean, like you can see it in the characters, like, I don't know if I described it this way or if I heard someone else say, like, the good characters are so good and the bad characters are like, so there are complex characters like Boromir, but it's like the purity in the characters, you know, it's just like amazing now compared to what you have now, where it's like none of the characters are really that good. It's like everyone's kind of just starts out pretty trashy and then they get better, but it's like these good, like Aragorn and Sam and a lot, these guys are really just like virtuous from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that has to do with his religion, definitely.
Yeah.
And that shows in the books. That almost went up my nose. So, what do you think?
I think so. That's about all we have for today. Hopefully we can get back to doing some more of these.
Maybe when I come back from Denver,
I'll be gone. Oh.
maybe we can do another one this week.
Tomorrow. But yeah, that was a podcast for today. I mean, I know it wasn't as goofy as many previous ones have been. We didn't have any cat antics or
No Shrek this time.
no cage giants.
Those cats are gone. Those cats have moved on. They're no longer in the house.
We moved on to greener pastures and fatter
Maybe we
lives.
could talk about The Hobbit, or maybe we can talk about your bone books. Unless those are, I'll have to look into those, see if they're good. You know,
Don't read too much into it. Might ruin the whole thing for you.
I'll let you be blissfully ignorant about that if that's the case. But yep. So that's the episode for today, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Before we forget, that's some new merch for the farm. I guess the ranch, Alley Ranch. They're cool hats. Mom got new ones. We got nice shirts with buttons on them and the logo. Pretty sweet.
Mm-hmm.
We're stepping it up.
Yeah, text in to 605-218-1713 for orders on the new merch.
That's my personal stuff.
Just putting that out there. But
We're
yeah.
gonna cut that.
No.
I had something else to say.
Better make it quick. I know you want to go to sleep.
Yeah, it's almost 10. But yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
Mm-hmm.
I hope this was a more informative one. This wasn't really well prepared, but it's a pretty...
I mean, are they ever?
No. Pretty straightforward, so.
Yeah.
It's fun to look into, though, if you're a aspiring writer. I would definitely kind of research the hero's journey, because you're probably going to know to do a lot of the things intuitively, but I'm sure it would help add a little spice to your story.
And if you have any like pre-written stories that you have written, we love to read them. You can email us at
submit them.
alleyranchpod@gmail.com, I think, is what we have.
We could link it.
Yeah, we'll link that.
We could link it in the description.
Yeah, you can send any questions you have.
Yeah, send some drafts. That'd be cool.
And if you have any ideas for a future podcast, you can also send it there, or to his personal cell phone number, which I have previously disclosed.
And Joseph's in the middle of a lore.
I am currently in the middle of writing a fantasy novel, which I had hoped to get some help from my fellow producers of this, but no one seems to be too interested anymore.
You kind of haven't worked on it in like a long time.
Like a little over a year.
Well, it's because you lost all your manuscripts.
Yeah.
It might be good to start over completely, though.
Needs a rewrite, but yeah.
You'll have a little more grasp on spelling and grammar.
May not be able to spell it all, but I can write some good stuff, okay?
You just send them to me and I'll edit them. But anyways, we won't keep you any longer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Hope this was a good one. God bless you. See you later.
Uncage the Giants.